Hello, and welcome to another edition of All or Not, according to Jack. You can see I'm sporting my Met gear today, and I have the Abbey Road top of the building behind me. Whereas my guest today is Stephen Keeler, and he has a very colorful background. And where are you, Steve?
I'm at my house and I call this the bunker. I call it the Rock Fantasy Files Studio, and it's my 1980s living room, which has become my fortress during the pandemic and through these last couple of years. And we started doing the YouTube vlog for my store, the Rock Fantasy Files, and use this room to listen to music. And when in the beginning of the pandemic, when I was home all the time, this was my area where me and my wife would separate for a little while than being in the house together. So yeah, this was my living room in the 80s. I lived in this house with my parents, and my parents moved away and got a condo when they got older, and we took over the family home, and I've lived in this house since 1960. That's how old I am.
Wow.
But this is my groovy, and this is not a backdrop. This is a real actual room with blacklight posters and reaction action figures and Godzilla toys and all that stuff. So.
Very cool. Okay, so just to let everybody know, very similar to what we did with Martin last week, this is going to be part of my A Day in the Life of series, and Steve Keeler will be our guest tonight. And we will ask Steve a bunch of questions to try and get to know him a little better, as he is a prized member of the Sea of Tranquility cast, and he's seen on Hudson Valley Squares on occasion, more often than not. So
Monday nights are usually usually every Monday I'm on there. Yeah. Yep.
Right. Okay. So let's get right down to it. Steve, tell us about a typical day in the life of Steve Keeler.
Well, do you want pre-pandemic or current?
Whatever you like.
Well, I mean, right now, I mean, I have a wife that has a lot of health issues. It's not, has some, is very sick, and I'm a caretaker for her. So my life has changed. Of course, what most of us has changed with the pandemic, even though it seems like we are coming out of it. And we always think we're coming out, because I feel like it's ocean waves, and there's a wave coming and it crashes and it's nice and mellow for a month or two, and then all of a sudden the wave comes again. So my life has changed a little bit. I have a staff of employees that work at the shop at Rock Fantasy. Of course, I own a record store, so we'll go about that. And when I get up in the morning, usually, and not every day, but almost every day, I'm at my shop at 9 in the morning. We don't open till 12 noon, and I go in and I take care of everything, because I was avoiding people for so long because of trying to shelter my wife's with her health condition. And so in the morning, I get up and I play a game of Madden football, usually, to wake up with, the latest edition of whatever on my PlayStation, and either that or maybe play a game of pinball to wake up and take care of what's going on around the house. And I'm usually up in the shop ordering stuff, working on pinball machines, or maybe restocking something, or any of that kind of thing, pricing records or whatever that came in. And I usually lately I've been up in the shop a lot more, overlapping with my employees for a couple hours, but usually by 3-4 o'clock or so, I'm out of the shop. We're open 12 to 7 every day, 7 days a week at Rock Fantasy.
Okay, cool. So now, is Rock Fantasy open on the weekends, or do you actually have weekend downtime?
No, Rock Fantasy is open 7 days a week. We do not close except for, maybe Christmas or I don't even know. I think we're actually even open Easter Sunday, because I asked both of my employees, hey, and one was begging to work. He was like, I want to work because that way I don't have to go to a stuffy family gathering. Mm-hmm. So, on the weekends, now that the spring weather's here and we're getting into the good weather again, hopefully, I'm also an avid stock car racing fan. And here in my town, in Middletown, New York, we have one of the oldest speedways in the country, Orange County Fair Speedway, and they race modified stock cars and other divisions every Saturday night, and I'm involved with that. I do a lot of sponsorship at the Speedway, have a lot of friends. I've been going there since I was 9 years old. So much like how you are a fan of baseball and probably been going since you're a kid or following
Yeah.
it. I'm into the dirt track racing a lot. So you'll catch me at the fairgrounds, and I go all around the tri-state area, Pennsylvania and New Jersey and upstate New York to the races during the year. So that's one of my passions other than music.
Okay, that's cool. And you basically answered part of that question. I was going to ask you about your hobbies and interests. So you mentioned stock car racing. Are there any
Mhm.
others?
My other hobbies, I guess, if you want to ask hobbies, is I collect stuff, kind of
Okay.
like a pack rat. I wouldn't say I'm a hoarder because I have things in order, but I collect pinball machines and I make it. I've been lucky enough in my life to share things that I like and make it into my business, like music. I collect records, and of course, I collect HO slot cars too. I have a bunch of AFX cars and stuff like that. I actually have a room in the house where I have a little slot car track set up. We used to have a slot car track in the store for years too, where people would come in and rent it out and race cars. So I've done a little bit of everything with that. I also collect, as you can see in the background, some of the reaction figures, which we sell in the shop. And yeah, I collect a lot of stuff. I also collect a lot of amusement park memorabilia too. I collect a lot of stuff and all that amusement. I have stuff from, even in the store, I have a clown from the Seaside Heights, New Jersey boardwalk, and I could ramble on for hours, so watch out.
Oh, okay. All right. So Pete just instituted a new show, and I asked Martin this question last week. So he has this new show called The Curse of the Collector. And since you mentioned collecting things, on a scale of 1 to 10, how bad would you say your curse is?
10, because I also collect blacklight posters. I guess we should mention that since I have them all over the walls. And I'd say a 10 because what I have an obsessive compulsive, and when I'm into something, I'm into it. Like if I'm into collecting something, I have to have, and it'll eat you up alive. You know that feeling where you just and you hem haw about it. Should I buy this? Should I save the money? You know, all that stuff. And I usually end up buying it and sometimes paying for it, later and going like, what did I just do?
Yeah. Well,
Mhm.
just so you know, the only reason I rolled my eyes up because my dog was barking. Because
I heard your dog. First I was checking on mine. My mine's much smaller and has a much lighter bark. But I heard her barking about 3 or 4 minutes ago. You probably didn't hear.
No. Oh, yours?
Yeah, mine's here somewhere. Is it
Oh,
out?
okay.
It's not with me right now.
No, I
It's
can
out in
hear
the other
mine.
part of the house somewhere.
Yeah. I have a
She may
70
come visit
pound.
during the episode. She usually comes out and checks.
Oh, okay. Well, I have a 70-pound collie mix, so she is a loud barker.
Yeah,
There she goes.
there she goes again.
So yeah, so that was one of my questions. So tell us about your dog.
Well, I have a dog that I was dogless for a couple of years, and I never want to be dogless again. I'm a big dog lover, and my wife and I decided, even with her health, we didn't get another dog for years ago. The whole thing about breaking it in, and she was not really up to taking care of it. But then we decided, and she gave in. And who knew the pandemic was coming? But we had adopted her about a month. She's a rescue dog. She's a mixture of a rat terrier and a chihuahua. She weighs about 13 pounds.
Oh, wow.
She's a little feisty. She's showed up on the Sea of Tranquility quite a bit. She pop in like, not as famous as Ryan Scow's dog there,
Right.
but is on almost every episode. But I say all along that dog has kept me going through this pandemic sometimes, and through everything we've been going through. And you look at her, and it just gives you a little bit of oomph for positivity, as dogs do. And
No
she's
doubt.
pretty much by my side all the time. She's used to me being home all the time because I haven't been going out that much with the pandemic and everything. And I think she's going to have to go to work if things ever roll out to be completely normal when I'm up there all day. She may have to be a what do you want to call it? A store dog at times. And she gets along fine with people, but she has a very bad problem with other dogs. She just wants to engage and destroy anything. Doesn't matter what size.
Mhm. Wow.
That's the problem. So
Okay. All right. So, speaking of pets, any pet peeves?
pet peeves?
Pet peeves, yeah.
I
Now,
don't know.
mine is outside, my pet peeve. Now she's barking outside.
I hear pet peeve is barking outside. A pet peeve, but what do you mean by that? Like something
Meaning,
that,
like, what are things that that bother you in society? Like, one of my pet peeves is slow drivers and drivers that don't know where they're going. So
yeah,
anything,
that's one, because I mean, me being involved in the races, and I do play racing video games and stuff. I used to be an iRacer.
mm,
Yeah, I kind of like to drive fast and be in kind of control of things. And you see like people driving that you never saw snow before and stuff like that could be a pet peeve. Another pet peeve for me is, even though I own a record store, I get discredited sometimes for general music knowledge because I listen to extreme music like death metal and black metal. You'll
right.
get kind of people, I get that sometimes, where people that don't understand that kind of music, well, what does he know? He listens to that cookie
Yeah,
crumble or whatever, they cookie
yeah,
growling
I
music.
hear
And
you. Yeah.
but that's one of my peeves, I guess. I don't know.
Okay. Oh, that's cool. You answered it well. So is there anything that you would like to share that nobody knows about you?
Wow. I think I'm pretty much out in the open about everything. I don't think there's too much that people don't know about me that know me. I don't know if I could answer that question.
Okay, that's
I mean, I guess being that I'm such a metalhead and, hard rock person, no one would believe. And I guess once in a while, if you follow my Instagram feed, you'll see I listen to a lot of 50s and 60s. I can listen to the oldies a lot. Of course, I grew up with that. I call it back seat of mom and dad's car music sometimes, the 60s
yeah.
stuff, because I'm 61 years old. And I listen to a lot of soul. I guess this is one thing maybe a lot of people don't know, but when I grew up, of course, I grew up on WABC radio, New York City, and they played a variety of everything from, the Allman Brothers to the Beatles to the Supremes to, anything was across, from the hardest rock at the time to the greatest, soul and stuff like that. And when I
Excellent.
was a kid, I primarily listened to soul music until
Great.
probably the early 70s. Was I hung out when my first day in school. I'm an only child, was deathly afraid of going to school, didn't know what it was, never really liked school in general anyhow. But first day, the group that I started hanging out with were all African American guys, and we became friends, and I hung out with them the whole time, basketball practice, playing electric football, listening to nothing but Soul Train. The first record I ever bought was a Jackson 5 record. And
Ah,
then I moved on to something a little more, I would say, I thought heavier. I got the Temptations Greatest Hits Part 2 with Ball Confusion and Psychedelic Shack. And I still could go back, and I just love that time period and our big thing was Saturday morning at 11 o'clock, we'd call each other on the phone. Like, hey, guess who's on Soul Train this morning? So I grew up a soul kid,
that's very cool.
soul kid. And of course, ABC. And
I'm
I
gonna
used
let
to
you
have
in. I'm gonna
uh,
let you in on a little secret. I happen to really like soul and the early R&B from the mid '60s to probably the late '70s myself. And
yeah,
who knows? Maybe we could do it. We can collaborate on a show at some point.
sure. Because I saw Pete go on like 70s AM top 40 one time, and I was like,
Right,
man, you're leaving out a lot of good songs. I remember
right,
him doing it. And when I was a kid, I collected 45s, of course.
right.
That was the first thing I got. I mean, the first Fell album I bought was a Jackson 5 record and that Temptations, but I probably only had a couple full length records. It was all 45s.
Okay.
And my mom, most people wouldn't let this happen. I put little like tack nails in my wall in my bedroom, and I made my own like top 20 record albums, and I would keep my records on the wall because I was obsessed with listening to like Casey
Wow.
Kasem's American Top 40 or Cousin Brucey at the time. And I had
Cool.
my own little top uh, chart on my
Oh,
wall. So I've always been a big music fan, you know?
okay, very cool. So we'll talk about that offline, setting one up in the future.
Yeah,
I don't know
sure.
how soon, but I definitely would like to do it.
Yeah.
Very cool topic. So, okay, so enough of the personal side. We'll talk about the rock fantasy questions that I put together for you.
Okay.
Tell me, how long have you been in business, first of all?
All right. So this is another one. Some people may not know this either. I started my store in 1979. I opened a store called Rock and Roll Fantasy. If you're familiar with Middletown, if folks are watching that know the town, it was on Route 211 where Wendy's fast food restaurant currently sits. And it used to be a building that was down in, and there was a wagon on the roof for some reason. And I rented this out as I was an 18-year-old kid, just got out of high school. I got kicked out of school, worked at the department store for a little while, and decided to open my own shop. And it was doing pretty good. I sold nothing but paraphernalia and concert shirts at the time. I had a friend called Dave O'Keefe that had a mail order thing you used to see in the back. If you got some old Cream or Circus magazines from the 70s, you'd see a place called the T-shirt Barn. And
Oh,
it was around Middletown, New York. And a friend of mine knew the guy somehow, and we got to go there one day. And I made a connection, and we just to get shirts from him and would sell them in the store. But I only had that shop for about 3 months. I was way too young and not knowing what I was doing. We got robbed like blind. People came in one night and totally stole everything out of the store.
it's a shame.
To the point, and then the police didn't want anything to do with it because taboo. This is 1979, and I had it was a head shop for the most part. So I tried to move into downtown Middletown now, where I am, and they found out what I was doing, and they did not let me open there. So I regrouped, and I started doing fairs and flea markets, mostly flea markets, but I did some county fairs, kind of became a little bit of a carny, and had my rock and roll tent with my t-shirts. Didn't sell much paraphernalia anymore after that because it was taboo to sell that at a fairgrounds or a flea market for the most part. So we were doing concert shirts, maybe some rock buttons, stuff like that. And 1985 rolls around. I was doing something called the Maybrick Flea Market every weekend. It's no longer there. It was in Maybrick, New York, about half hour from Middletown. And I had gone to a Loudness concert the night before, the Japanese metal band down in Rockland County. Did not sleep a bit, was, hungover, drove there. I would drive. I remember, I'd go to get something to eat, and I'd go. It happened before. It wasn't the first time I'd do something, go to a show. I had an old station wagon full of all the rock and roll merchandise, and I pulled up, and we set up, and my mother and father were there. And I passed out. And my mom, I'm my only kid. My mom was a nurse at the hospital. And they insisted that my mom mostly, my father was like, yeah, whatever, you're okay. And my mom insisted that I open up a regular store. So with $2,000 in November 5th of 1985, I opened a record shop in Middletown selling records and t-shirts and some cassettes.
Mhm.
And of course, there was a need for heavy metal then. You couldn't just go out too easily and find some of the, underground stuff like Metallica and Venom and stuff like that. And that's what we were. We were a heavy metal shop. And who knew how long we were going to last? But here we are, 37 years later. I've moved 3 locations since then, all within 2 of them were in the same block. And in 2019, we moved to a new location 2 blocks up at 12 East Main in Middletown, New York. So
Okay.
somehow I pulled it off. It's been a struggle over the years. I was a comic book store for a while. We had a slot car raceway for a while. We were heavily involved in the pro wrestling in the 90s. So like a chameleon. You had to change your business at times.
Right.
And now, I mean, we had in the 90s a bunch of pinball machines too, but now in what was it, around 2013, I had taken over the storefront next to me at the old location. And another one of my passions, pinball machines, I opened a pinball room and I just about doubled my rent. And after I did it, I was so happy I did this. But then I sat down as a business person and said, what did I just do to myself? And it took off, though. It took off. And now in 2022, the pinball machines are really doing so well that they're a major part of the business now.
That's awesome.
We have about 40 pinball machines in the shop.
Wow.
And, the store, if no one's watching, doesn't know anything about me, when you walk into my store, the left side is a record store. And we carry everything. We don't carry just heavy metal. We carry country and hip hop. And, we do specialize mostly on hard rock. We have a lot of used records and a lot of new records, and we're a record store day store. So we do the record store day campaigns. And then to the right side, there's a 21 and up section where you walk through in between the cases. And that's our head shop, our smoke shop. And then as you walk to the back of the store, we have 40 pinball machines set up. Soon, a couple classic video games are coming this week too. And we have over 100 blacklight posters to sell.
Wow.
So if you come in, and we market the store as an experience, a lot of places, they sell blacklight posters, but they're just in a little rack like a Spencer gift. We have them on the walls. It looks like this room sort of mixed in with the pinball machine. So that's
Okay.
rock fantasy. And yeah, of course you probably have different questions, and I do ramble on. So
Well, you managed to answer my next question. How was the Rock Fantasy store experience unique versus other record stores? But I think you've answered that.
compared to other record stores, I mean, I'm not going to judge all the other record stores, as I haven't been in a lot. I mean, we have a really nice record store up in Poughkeepsie called Darkside Records that seems to be laid out very well, and I think they do quite well also. My store is more of a, I guess if you took arcade, a head shop, and a record shop, and you mixed them all together. I mean, the arcade never really flew with that, but a lot of people come to my store that are older, like that next generation. It's after me, like guys that were at the Woodstock Fest and stuff, walk in and they'll see a blacklight poster, or they'll see something that say, I had that in my dorm in 1975 or something. And, or they remind me of a store. This reminds me of a store that was in Greenwich Village at one time. If you remember, the Village with Bleecker Street had a lot of store. I mean, there's a couple left, but most of them are gone. Just a rock and roll store with we have patches and shirts and buttons and figures and all that good stuff. But I try to give it a rock and roll experience coming in.
That's really
In the
cool.
pinball machines, we try to have all the rock and roll related titles in the pinballs. We have most of them in the shop that were ever made, from the 70s to the current ones. With the brand new one is based on the band Rush. So
Oh, very cool. Well, I sometimes golf in the area, so if I ever do, I have to swing by. So
yeah, you need to come by.
yeah,
Have you ever been to the store at all?
no, I haven't actually.
Oh, okay. I've seen you at Bethel Woods, so you got no excuse.
No, you're right. No, sad thing is, so my son used to work at a Boy Scout camp right nearby in White Lake, I think it is.
Oh yeah, sure.
Yeah, Camp Keeler. He was program director for a few years.
Okay.
So I would be able to go visit him and take in a few Bethel Woods concerts, but he's since grown. He's basically grown out of it, and he's in the business world now. So
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
So I miss those days, but
Yeah. Sure.
I'll find a reason to get up there.
Yeah.
Yeah, but
Play pinball.
yeah. Well, that
Go
it's
to the
funny.
brewery next door.
So my buddy of mine and I, we did our ranking the albums of Jethro Tull for anybody who's interested in checking out my back catalog.
Yeah.
Actually, I told him about your Rush pinball machine. His eyes popped out. He's like, "Oh, road trip." So
Yeah, we have, you know, we have, if you want to talk about the pinball titles, we have the old Kiss that came out in 79. We had the Rolling Stones that came out in 80. We have which some people that are our age will remember seeing in the arcades back then in the late 70s. And the Ted Nugent one we just recently reacquired, and we got that up and running. It still needs a little love cosmetically, but it looks like it's been an arcade. It's an old game. And we have the Dolly Parton pinball machine.
nice.
And then we have the second generation that started in the early 2000s. Like the first one they kind of did was they redid a Rolling Stones as a Mick Jagger that goes across the playfield that you hit with the ball. And then we have the remake of the Kiss machine. We have the Metallica machine. We have Heavy Metal, the movie pinball, which is very rare. It came out a couple of years ago. I think they only made maybe 300. I don't even know if they did a full run on it. And that has music from, of course, it has the soundtrack from that movie, but some of the different artists are performing it because they didn't get the original artists to do it. But there's Cheap Trick is in the game.
Don
Of course, the
Felder,
Blue Oyster
got the
Cult,
song.
veteran of the Psychic Wars, and actually Halloween is in that. Some Nuclear Blast bands that were in that had nothing to do with the original movie.
Interesting.
Amorphous is
Wow.
also
Mm.
in the game. And then we have an Alice Cooper game, which was currently not in the shop because we have it at the house. It was acting up. We have a Rob Zombie. We have an Aerosmith.
Cool.
I'm going to leave something out, the Metallica one.
Yeah,
We've got a lot of rock and roll games to play in the shop, which
Cool.
is, really cool. Oh, the Guns N' Roses and the AC/DC we had also. So.
All right. So we'll have to coordinate when I'll have to make sure you're there. So before I take the trip, but
Yeah, we'll have to have a pinball tournament for you.
sure.
All or nada.
For me, it'll be nada.
Nada.
I suck at it. I enjoy it.
We should
but I
get
suck at it.
we get my channel and your channel and Pete's channel, and we'll have a party when they're there.
That
That'd
would be
good,
very
right?
cool. I'd like that. Yeah.
Yeah, something like that. Get all of us vloggers together.
Yeah. So do you have a favorite pinball machine or machines?
The one that I've had the most, and when I first opened my store in 1985, of course, I, grew up playing pinball as a kid at the Jersey Shore and up in Lake George with my parents on vacation, and they'd go to the shore, and of course they'd go to the beach and relax. I didn't know what that was about yet. I was like, oh, give me some quarters and I'm just going to hit all these arcades and play pinball. So the pinball that when I first opened my shop, of course, rock and roll store, in 1986 around, I started looking for a game. I said, well, I got to find a Kiss pinball machine to put in my shop. So I found the old original Kiss. And back then you could buy one for $500. So that was a lot of money then, though. So, we invested in a Kiss pinball machine. And so I guess that would be my favorite game from back then, just because it's so classic. And I used to have one in this very room. When this was my living room, we had the TV where I'm sitting now. Our couch was over there. Fish tank was over here. And Kiss pinball was here. So there was many a morning after a late night where that would be the first thing I would do after a wake and bake and come over and play Kiss pinball with some music on. And of course there's one been in the store for most of my life. And that game, you used to be able to find it for like $500-600 from like operators that had them out in arcades and then sell them for like $1,500. Now that game is worth about $3,000 to $4,000.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so they're that a lot of people do full restores, which make them look even better than they were when they were new. They restore these pinball machines just like someone would restore a classic car.
Wow.
And my modern pinball just came out, I would say. Oh, and I left out one of the most important pinball machines. They made an Iron Maiden one a couple of years ago. So we have that. But I think my favorite new game from the time period of now, the new Godzilla pinball machine, is amazing to play.
Cool.
Has a rock and roll connection too, because when you get the multi-ball, it plays the Blue Oyster Cult tune. So
Oh, nice. Very
it
cool.
plays Godzilla. So
Okay. So,
if you like the old Godzilla movies
yeah.
and the action that goes on in here and the footage, because these new pinball machines have LCD screens in. So it's actually showing all this footage from Godzilla movies, and it has all the his adversaries and his friends that help
Yeah,
him fight.
with the little wire.
Oh yeah. The Mothra girls are there, and Mothra helps Godzilla fight like Gigan and
Right.
King Caesar's there and
Right.
Ghidorah and everybody. So it's a great the light show and the whole presentation. Of course, the rush is really good too. That just came out. Tons of footage of the band playing through it while you're playing the pinball. It's quite intense.
Okay. Very cool. So we're going to move on to the next topic, and our last topic, Rock Fantasy, the YouTube channel. Uh,
Okay.
what would you like to talk about with that, or how often is it on,
Well,
first of all?
what we did with the Rock Fantasy YouTube channel, I probably would have never done one, but one for the pandemic. I've always done Pete's show. I've done Pete's show when Pete had like 65 viewers.
Wow.
Now, Pete would come to the shop every year at Christmas time or around the holidays, and we'd do our top 10 albums of the year. And at first it was like, yeah, it's fun to do this, but it's like, does anybody even watch these? But we do it because it was fun, and we'd all go have a beer or have a
Right.
holiday dinner, a burger or something after it. And we did that for years. And I mean, Pete's channel just took off. God bless it. He took from one day from having like a couple hundred viewers a video to having like 15,000 now. And he's done so well with it. And of course, he's a great friend and
Yeah.
guy. He used to, one of my great customers, been shopping there since I opened, and he's done so well. But what happened with me was I was doing his show, and in the beginning of the pandemic, I didn't even want to talk about music. I thought the world was ending. A lot of us did, of course. You were just in shock, like what's going on next. And I was one of the guys that would still go on Pete's channel, and it gave you something to do because I was just stuck in the house. And we were reviewing the albums of Opeth or something another. We kept doing. We had a lot of good guests on that because I had contacted Brian Slagle, so we had Brian Slagle, the owner of Metal Blade, on a lot. We had little Elliot that does the little punk people vlog on, and so we had a lot of fun doing that. And then there was a gentleman that I'm friends with still. I haven't talked to him in a while. It's Kenny Pierce, who does a lot of rock photography in New York City, and he said, you know what? He said, why don't you do your own thing? And he actually came up with the name Rock Fantasy Files, and I have to reach out to Ken and talk to him, but he came up with that name for me. And at the same time, the other reason for doing it was I needed a presence on the internet because I had launched a website where you could buy records directly from my store, or mostly just directly from our warehouse where my one stop is, where we get all our vinyl from. And also some of our t-shirts, the Rock Fantasy shirts, some of the toys, the blacklight posters you can all buy online. So yeah, it's a good idea. And I knew a lot of people from the industry just from being around. So my first episode was actually interviewing Will Carroll of Death Angel. And now Will is the drummer of Death Angel, and he was on tour in Europe when this COVID thing first hit. And he was one of the guys that really got sick from it.
Wow.
Like in the beginning, you looked around, do we know anybody? Do you know someone that had COVID? And I said, well, I know Will Carroll did. And Will was in a coma for 3 weeks. He had to learn how to walk again and everything else. And he was my first interview. And Will went on to doing a bunch of Rock Fantasy vlogs with me. And, in the beginning, I didn't get many viewers either. I mean, we got about 3,200 subscribers now. We average around 13,000 views in a month, though. So we're doing pretty good. And, I don't want to say I copy Pete in a little bit, but Pete works back and forth. He's been gracious enough to work with me, and we go back and forth, and we do some of the same things like comparing albums. So last year I did a lot of band interviews too. I haven't done too much this year. I was working with Metal Blade and Napalm Records, and AFM and a couple other labels, Nuclear Blast, doing some interviews. I haven't done as much this year. I've just been a little bit more busy with the store again, and I've cut back, but we've been doing pretty well. We've been doing a lot of the album roundtables where we discuss stuff, but if it wasn't for the pandemic, I would have never started my own channel. So, but it's been a great way of socializing and meeting people and helping me promote music, which I've always been trying to do all my life. And it was a way of doing it along with like keeping safe and taking care of my wife and everything else. So it's been a blessing. I mean, last year at this time, and when all the bands were off tour, I had a who's who of like the underground metal scene, and some of the mainstream metal acts every week would be, hey, you're going to have so-and-so. We had, Vivian Campbell on. We were talking about Thin Lizzy. We had, guys from Black Sabbath. We had guys from Exodus and Death and all these different bands. And every week it was so much fun. And then when we get done taping for what we tape about an hour and a half, some nights, we would hang out and just on Zoom till 1, 2 in the morning, just chit chatting.
That's cool. Yeah.
That was the fun part. And having, Martin pop off on the channel was always good. And Martin's done quite a few shows with us too. And but now I've kind of reinvented the channel because all the bands are back working again. So I've just got like, music fans and some people that were just fans of Pete's show and my show that I invite to come on. Right. Most of the time it's been very good. Everyone's been really fun to have on. One time I had some guy came in out of the blue, though, a local guy that's in some local bands, and he came on and he was like, I don't know if he did some drugs or he was really drunk when he came on. And I was like, I guess we have to screen people before we bring them on the first time sometimes.
Right. But, yeah.
I'm not professional. I actually have a microphone now and everything, so we're doing better. But in the beginning, I just used a laptop. No frills. I don't edit anything. I don't know how to. Maybe one day I'll find somebody to edit some of the stuff in. But
no, I have a pretty simple operation here too. But I always pre-record to, just
no wild intros or anything, right? No dancing girls or
anything like that. I did have a situation last week where I actually had my biological brother on with me to talk about Steely Dan, and about 30 minutes in, right before he got to his #1 Steely Dan song, he froze, and I had to kill the recording and then start a second recording of about 10 minutes more so we can round up the show. So
I've had that happen before. One of the big episodes I did last year when I had like, guys from like 10 different bands and me, we had like a power outage one night, and you know what? They kept going though. I don't know. Zoom was weird. I thought the whole thing would just shut down when I lost my internet, but the thing kept going somehow, and then I popped back in, so it was saved somehow.
Oh, that's cool.
But yeah, that freezing up stuff happens a lot. I don't see it as much lately on Zoom, but I used to see it a lot where you could hear somebody, but their face wasn't moving anymore, or this and that.
It was just connection. It had to have been.
Yeah.
All right, so that's about it. Let's see if you have anything else.
I mean, years ago, I think we were chatting where I think we're going to talk about this maybe on another episode down the road, but I was heavily involved in the pro wrestling business for a while.
Right.
I was selling ECW shirts. I don't really have wrestling merchandise in the store anymore now at all, even though wrestling has had a big, I'd say, renaissance the last year or so with AEW and some of the other indies building up some steam. It wasn't for years, it was just WWE, but we used to sell ECW shirts. I used to go to ECW Arena every 3 weeks. I was part of the club with Chris Allo's tickets there from Sea of Tranquility, and we started doing a lot of signings in the store. And I was the only guy that had ECW shirts. One day Taz came up to me and we were at a convention selling. I used to do a lot of like Chiller Theater and toy shows and stuff in New Jersey. And he came up and thought we had bootleg stuff. And then I said, hey, and he was really ready to call the police and get us arrested for selling it. And I said,
wow,
call Tommy Dreamer, and then everything was fine. But
right,
back then, there was no internet for people to sell stuff either. So
right,
I was the only place that had like the ECF and W shirt that said politically incorrect in the back.
right.
And we would take those and sell those at high schools. So I started working, we had so many wrestling shirts. I started working with Northeast Wrestling, and Mike O'Brien, who's still in business now. We would go and we had the Austin 316 shirts,
Mm.
and I don't care how many of those you could buy, you would sell every one of them at one of those cards. And
Speaking of
we would go
Austin
back to the hotel
316,
room and this wads of money from wrestling. And
so
of course, then we ordered way too many wrestling shirts, and I was working 2 flea markets trying to sell off the surplus, with my sister-in-law working at one in Maybrook when that was still open, where I started my business. And I was working at one in Poconos every Sunday, because we had, what are we going to do with all these wrestling shirts? We over-ordered them, and we were just selling so much wrestling. That was an interesting fact. Like I said, I changed my business back and forth so many years to stay involved. Somebody called me a little trendy at times, but if comics were big, I had comics, and wrestling got big.
strike where the iron's hot. I mean,
You gotta try, yeah.
yeah, absolutely. But you
Yeah.
mentioned Stone Cold Steve Austin. I was in the supermarket, local. Actually, we have a Stu Leonard's down here where
Oh yeah,
right near where I
fancy
live.
place.
So I was walking through there, and they have a really nice selection of microbrews and specialty beers. And I saw the Stone Cold Broken Skull Lager. I
Oh
looked at
yeah.
it. It's like $15 for a 4-pack. I couldn't
Well,
believe
that's what the craft beers go for. Like we have the
I've
Equilibrium
seen a lot
Brewery next to
less
my store,
expensive
which
than
is a
that.
very famous, and I mean that's probably the cheapest 4-pack in there is around
I
15 to
usually
18.
I usually spend $10 to $12 for a 6, but this is a 4-pack. But
I know I saw a guy going up to Poughkeepsie, and I'd like to. Sometimes I like just having a can. They did a Rock Fantasy beer at the local EQ, and they do that every so often. They do a Rock Fantasy beer, and it has our logo on it. It has like 2
nice.
flippers for the pinball machines. But
Very cool.
I saw a beer that somebody came up. There was a Pantera Vulgar Display of Power in a can.
Right.
I like collecting those and just having them like we're sitting around.
What, so
Sometimes
you
I don't
had-
even open them. But
you had a microbrewery actually make this beer for you? And so
yes,
put your name on it?
Equilibrium made a Rock Fantasy beer. But they've done 3 batches. Of course, they don't have it all the time. They run it, and
Right.
and they'll have it for a couple weeks, and
Very nice.
hopefully we'll have another one done. That's the thing now. Like all the bands are doing that too. Like Deftones have a beer, and Megadeth has beer. Iron Maiden, of course, has a pretty big beer, which you can pretty much buy anywhere. But you get a lot of these. I was at a show in New York City, a King's Brewery in New York City. There's a lot of like the cans look great. They almost look like a Marvel comic. That's great artwork. And they did a Behemoth beer. I remember going to see Behemoth in the city, and they were everyone was drinking Behemoth beer. So it is a trendy thing with these, to do that stuff now.
Hey, if there's money to be made, you can't fault. You got to make a living. I mean, I hear you.
Craft beer is big now, right?
Yeah, and you want to know something? For me, it replaces the old swill mass-produced crap that that they sell. I mean, I could never go back to that. Yeah.
I can't usually either. I got turned on to by a beer by Pete Pardo once. It was the all day IPA.
Oh, okay.
And that one, he was drinking it in the city, and I had that, and I get that in a 12 pack a lot. And it's not as expensive. I forget the brewery that does it, but it's all day IPA. Actually, I got a can right here. I didn't drink tonight, but
look,
it's Founders.
Oh, okay. Founders.
And you could drink them. They're kind of like a
session, session.
Coors Light of IPA type beer, where you can drink a few, and some of those are like 12%. You have one, you're dead. Not dead, but you're shot.
Okay.
But
well, that's very cool. Yeah, I'm not a big IPA guy. I'm more into the Belgian ales and lagers and the pilsners. But in any event, this was a very fun discussion.
cool.
thank you so much for being on, Steve.
Yeah.
And you know what? I don't want to give too much away, but Steve and I are planning on doing a couple of wrestling shows
Okay.
in the near future, and
Mhm.
we'll talk about it offline. And once I have more details, I'll share it with the public and let everybody
Cool.
know. But
And of course, if you'd like to check out Rock Fantasy, you can check us out on the web, rockfantasy.com. And well, I'm Stephen Keeler. You can find me on Facebook with a PH. You can also find Rock Fantasy on Facebook, and you can also find the Instagram, Rock Fantasy Record Shop or Smoke Shop. I forget my tag on there now. I'm in trouble, but look up Rock Fantasy and you'll find me. I do a lot on social media
what
too.
I'll do is I'll put your
Your links.
website in the comments section so people can
And
see.
it's an honor being on the same interview series as Martin. So
Yeah, hey, and Pete. Yeah, and
but I'm a metal veteran like him, and we call the metal merchants. You know, I've been selling metal and music and pipes for many, many years. I was talking to someone in the head shop industry, and they said that I should be in their Hall of Fame.
But my point is, I appreciate you having me on your show so much. So
Yes.
I finally got to return the favor and have you on mine.
Thank you. Yeah.
Hopefully,
And
we'll do
it's
a
an
few
honor
more.
to have you on too. It's great to have some people and to give their, not everybody wants to sit around for an hour and do homework
Well, but
like
this
school.
is a lot of fun. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't understand people's misgivings with it, but
And it's easy when you're just getting interviewed because I don't have to work on questions and listen to two
Yeah.
albums. Right.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, exactly.
Cool.
But
Well, I hope I
anyway,
did all right with you.
oh, you did great. This was a lot of fun. I appreciate
Yep,
it.
yep.
But just to let our audience know, thank you for watching. This is Jack Toledano for All or Nada, according to Jack. If you like my content, please subscribe. Put your comments in the comments section. Go over and visit Stephen Keeler's Rock Fantasy Files channel. It's a lot of fun.
Mhm.
Has a lot of great mixed content. There's classic rock, metal, death metal, what have you. So go
Yeah.
over, check it out, and have a very good night, everybody.
Thank you, guys.
All right. Have a good one. Bye.